Welcome, dear dreamer. You've arrived in a place of peace, a place where effort can pause, where breath can deepen, and where you can simply be. Tonight's story is more than just a tale. It's a gentle reflection of something we all encounter. Moments when life changes without warning, when what was solid slips away, and we're left in the quiet aftermath asking, what now? This story is about starting again. Not from force or urgency, but from stillness and presence. It invites you to consider what remains when everything else has burned away. It is about transformation, not the loud kind we chase, but the kind that arrives slowly like dawn, or a seed rising from ash. Senna's journey mirrors a truth you may have lived, that strength doesn't always roar, and healing doesn't always rebuild what was. Sometimes healing simply means listening, letting go, and shaping something new with whatever your hands still hold. These are the kinds of stories we share here, rooted in ancient philosophy, infused with meaning, and softened by compassion. They are here not just to help you sleep, but to gently awaken the wiser part of you that already knows how to carry on. If stories like this offer you comfort or clarity, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps others find their way to these quiet corners of reflection and renewal. So now, let us prepare the mind and body. Let the day slip away. Let the breath guide you gently inward. Take a slow, deep breath in through the nose. And exhale softly. Again, inhale and release. Let the day soften its grip. Let your thoughts drift like smoke into the evening air. Now, if you're ready, let your breath settle. Let your mind loosen its grip. There is no need to try. No need to follow every word. Just let the rhythm guide you, soft and slow. Let the story meet you where you are. You are here now, safe and tonight, we walk with Senna through loss, through stillness, and into quiet renewal. Let us begin.
The fire had come swiftly, no warning, no time to gather anything but breath. In the end, the village did not burn in pieces. It burned all at once, and now all that remained was ash. Senna stood in the middle of it, barefoot in the soot. The hem of her dress darkened to grey. Her pottery workshop, her kiln, her shelves of glazed and unglazed work, gone. The silence after flame was the loudest thing she'd ever heard. No birds, no hammers, only wind and a distant creak of wood surrendering to ruin. She did not cry, she did not speak, she simply stood, and in her chest something was both broken and waiting. The next morning, the villagers gathered in silence. They did not speak of rebuilding. They did not move with purpose. They stood like statues, looking at the bones of what used to be their lives. Each had lost something. A roof, a memory, a map of how things once made sense. Senna knelt beside what used to be her kiln. The stones were cracked, the iron wheel warped, her tools melted, buried in soot. She felt the urge to scream, but even that felt like effort she no longer owned. She picked up a shard of a once finished bowl, the glaze spider-webbed with fracture, yet still, somehow, whole in its brokenness. Her fingers trembled around it, and in that moment she asked the sky no questions. She simply held what remained and breathed. The following day, Senna returned to the ruins alone. She walked to the place where her wheel had once spun, where water had once cooled her hands between firings, where shelves once held the shimmer of weeks of patient labour. She knelt, knees in the soot, and pressed her fingers into the ground. The ash was fine, warm from the sun, and soft like powdered earth. She let it sift between her fingers, darkening the creases of her palm. Then, with no plan, no reason but instinct, she scooped up a handful of ash and what remained of the clay beneath. Her fingers began to move, not with purpose, but memory, rolling, folding, pressing gently. A shape emerged, not elegant, not planned, just a form, rounded, uneven, a vessel. She found an old stone and set it like a base. Nearby, a burnt branch still held some red at its core. She leaned close and coaxed a flame. By nightfall, the shape hardened slightly beside the embers, cracked and imperfect, but it had form. She stared at it long into the night. It was nothing, and it was everything. The next morning, she returned to it. The shape sat there in the grey light, dry, warm, dusty. She picked it up, turning it over in her palms. It didn't shine. It didn't match any of her past work, but it held its form. It held space. That, she realized, was enough. Senna gathered more ash and earth. She moulded again. Her fingers remembered the motions, even if her heart still hesitated. This wasn't about artistry now. It was about presence, repetition, breath. With each new vessel, she asked less from herself, expected less from the shape. She simply moved. And slowly, without words, her hands began to speak again. Later that week, as the sun slipped into its golden stretch, Senna noticed a few shadows moving near her work. Children, their faces smudged with soot and wonder, stood quietly watching her fingers work through ash. They didn't ask questions, just watched with wide, curious eyes. A mother passed by, then a father. None stayed long at first, but their presence warmed the edges of the silence. One boy approached, holding a broken mug. The handle had been lost in the fire. "Can you make one like this?" he asked, eyes full of soft hope. Senna looked at the mug, then at her hands, and nodded. She did not promise perfection, but she promised to try. That evening, as Senna moulded a shape similar to the boy's mug, her fingers slowed. A memory surfaced. Her grandmother's voice, gentle, worn by time. Clay remembers fire, but it does not resist it. She had heard that once, when she was a child, struggling to keep a bowl from collapsing. Back then, she thought it was about pottery. Now, it felt like something more. Every piece she touched now carried not just form but story. Loss and effort, memory and breath. She began carving small symbols into the bases of her vessel. A flame, a leaf, a wave, marks of things that endure by yielding. Each night, her kiln of stones and embers glowed faintly under the stars. A soft pulse of resilience. One morning, the sky wept. A soft, cleansing rain. It fell on soot and soil alike, drawing dark rivers through the dust. Senna sat beneath the charred frame of what had once been her roof, letting the droplets slide down her arms, her face. The air smelled clean for the first time in weeks. Fresh, earthy, forgiving. She watched as the ash thickened into mud, as the old mixed with the new, as the rain softened what fire had hardened. Nearby, between two blackened stones, something unexpected pushed up from the ground. A green shoot, small, delicate, real. Senna leaned close, her breath caught, not just at the life itself, but at the quiet truth of it. Something had been waiting, beneath, all along. She didn't touch it. She only watched. And for the first time since the fire, she smiled. That evening, as dusk softened the sky, a man approached Senna's workspace, older, quiet, carrying a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. He knelt slowly and unwrapped it. Inside lay a shattered heirloom pot, its surface etched with symbols of ancestry. "It belonged to my grandmother," he said softly. "Fire took it, but it still feels like her." Senna touched the pieces, held one gently. "They can't go back to how they were," she said. "I know," he whispered, "but maybe they can become something new." She nodded. That night, by firelight, she began fitting the shards into a fresh vessel, not to repair, but to transform, piece by piece, not hidden, but honored. Each fracture became part of the design, and in that quiet labor, she felt something sacred pass between hands and memory. Not restoration, but reverence. Words spread, gently, like seeds on the breeze. What Senna was doing wasn't rebuilding in the old way, but beginning something entirely new. One morning, a mother came with a wooden spoon. Another brought stones from her collapsed hearth. A child brought melted glass. No one asked Senna to make things as they were. They simply asked her to show them how to shape what remained. So she did. Not with instruction, but with presence. Not by leading, but by listening. people gathered not just to work, but to sit, to touch earth again, to feel fire not as destruction, but as part of the cycle. Around her fire pit, the village began to form a circle. Not buildings yet, but belonging. Days passed, then weeks. Ash gave way to soil, and where blackness once covered everything, now colour returned. Senna began to gather stones, not from memory, but with intention. She built not a grand kiln like before, but a small one, low to the ground, fed by driftwood and patience. She called it Ember. Each time she lit it, the fire whispered rather than roared. It warmed the clay like a quiet conversation. The villagers brought their own work now. Mugs, bowls, figures, stories shaped in earth. Senna tended the kiln gently, like a keeper of something sacred. A space for becoming, a vessel for change. Not everything fired perfectly. Some cracked, some wobbled, but all were beautiful in their own quiet way. And each one a testament to what could grow from the ash. One morning, Senna walked the path beyond the village, where the fields reached toward the hills and the sky turned wide. She carried no tools, no clay, only her breath and quiet steps. The village behind her was no longer silent. Laughter moved like wind through the trees. Fires burned not with destruction, but with warmth. Senna sat at its roots and thought not of what was lost, but of what had never left. The hands that shaped, the hearts that remembered, the soil that held seed in stillness. She did not need to go back. The past had already walked forward, and so had she. On the edge of the river, where the fire had once licked at the reeds, Senna placed a single bowl. It was small, unglazed, made only of ash and clay and breath. She didn't place it as an offering or a monument, just as a moment. It sat there, catching the light of the rising sun, empty, still, whole. Behind her, life stirred. Ahead, the river moved without rush. And Senna, softened by what had burned, and strengthened by what had remained, closed her eyes and listened to the quiet between the currents. Not everything had to be mended. Not every scar needed hiding. Not every silence needed words. Some things were meant to be held as they were. And in that gentle truth, she breathed and became part of the stillness. Dear dreamer, as you rest now in the quiet after Senna's journey, know that this story carries something for you too. We all face fires, loss, change, moments that level what we thought was solid. And like Senna, we often find ourselves standing in the ash, unsure of what to hold or how to begin again. But this story reminds us, you do not need to rush to rebuild. You do not need to become what you were. The ember still glows within you, quiet, strong, waiting. Let what remains guide you. Let your hands remember what your heart still knows. You are allowed to shape something new from what the world has given you now. And most of all, you are not broken, you are simply becoming. So rest now, let these gentle truths settle in you like soft soil. And when you're ready, carry them with you into the waking world. Until then, breathe, dream, and know you are already whole.